What up, friends? Does this count as a home invasion? And today we're going to be reviewing Harry Styles' newest album, Harry's House. This is the third solo album by English singer-songwriter Harry Styles. Ever since going out on his own since the One Direction hiatus, Harry's been making some pretty engaging moves as a pop star. From the 70s classic rock aesthetic of his debut self-titled to the more contemporary pop rock and indie pop stylings of Fine Line, Harry's sound might not be the most original thing out there, but he does craft some very well-crafted homages to his influences for sure. Harry's House, however, is different. After having some time to himself post-touring, Harry's newest record sounds very grounded and intimate. Unfortunately though, this translates into some very sparse and bland instrumentals for a good chunk of this project. There definitely is some good to be had here, especially in the more upbeat songs on the project alongside the general songwriting as well. However, that doesn't change the fact that a good deal of this album is kind of a snooze to listen to. The album knows how to make a good impression at least, since Music for a Sushi Restaurant is one of the best songs on the record. The jazzy pop aesthetic just feels natural for him, and the punchy bass and vibrant background vocals just add a ton of character to the song. The guitar picking is quirky, and the glitzy rise into the chorus is just so much fun. The track in general just has a ton of personality, and each element comes together in very engaging ways. I'm also really digging the largely instrumental chorus. I think sometimes the instrumentals can say more than words, and I think this is one of those times. Late Night Talking is another pretty slick one, featuring some quirky synths and some smooth bass and vocals. That chorus is also really playful, almost having a dance pop style in its production. It's a well put together track overall, feeling very simple yet very tight instrumentally, especially when the guitars and vocal harmonies pick up during the post-chorus. It's a sweet and happy song about being totally smitten by someone to the point where you're staying up all night talking to them. Everything on here just embodies that. Grapejuice has one of the best instrumentals on this thing, from the muted piano, ambient synths, and elegant vocals. The rhythm of this song is super smooth and pleasant to listen to, feeling very vibey but still having a good presence to it. The chorus is also delicate and sweet, and the instrumental breaks are also pretty fun. I'm also digging that playful outro as well. It feels like a daydream, fitting for the lyrics about Harry just kinda chilling with his lover with a glass of wine. As It Was is okay, though I do think it's probably one of Harry's most underwhelming singles. There's not much oomph behind this one, featuring a very tinny beat and synths that are almost too light and airy. Harry's vocals also aren't really reaching their full potential here, I think. The chorus especially just kind of feels underwhelming. I also cannot shake the feeling how this is basically just a boneless Take On Me by a-ha, especially in the synth. It's kind of uncanny. It's not a bad track per se, and I do like the bells and general structure, but it's just pretty low impact. Daylight is definitely one of the weakest moments on the record, and is also a pretty good example of the album at its blandest points. The beat is pretty much a non-event, with these very bland and repetitive bass and drums that don't have any sort of power behind them. Harry's vocals also really aren't doing much on this track, feeling very soft and stagnant throughout the entire track's runtime. It just stays in one place constantly, and while the chorus does try to spice things up a bit with a very huge and noisy synth presence, it's not enough to save this one. Little Freak has some good vocals and pretty intimate lyrics, but again, I find the instrumental to be pretty bland on this one. The chorus is probably the highlight of this track, feeling very ethereal as Harry is sort of lamenting a past relationship that kind of slipped through his fingers. However, the simple guitar and very skeletal beat just are not doing anything for me. In fact, I think that's kind of a theme of this record, with Harry's vocals being pretty good and the lyrics are pretty well crafted, but the instrumentals on this thing largely just do not back them up all that well. Some people might rag on Cinema for being this sort of chill, city pop-esque tune with not much else going on, but I'm really digging its vibe. Smooth and glimmering synths, guitars, and vocals make for a very delicate and intimate experience. I also think it represents a pretty understated form of love, with Harry just kind of vibing and chilling with this person. He just thinks they're cool, and it's not much deeper than that. Sometimes it's just something deep down that you can't explain, but their presence alone is just enough to put you at ease. I also love those subtle, fluctuating synth strings that are in the chorus, too. It's just a very lush song, and it's perfect for this album's overall sound without being too sparse. Daydreaming is kind of like the last one if it was taken in a more jazzy and upbeat direction instead, which makes it a perfect song for Cinema to lead up to. It's got these very fun, almost disco-styled guitars, these dramatic sax flourishes, like there's a lot of texture on this one. The vocals are very light and breezy, but still have a good presence to them, and the general progression of this track feels very natural, I think. It's a super upbeat song about feeling complete and happy in the relationship that you're in. Keep Driving, Satellite, and Boyfriends are very similar to Daylight for me, where they're just kind of there. They don't really have much impact to them, and they're kind of off sulking to the side in the presence of the more dynamic tracks on the record. Like I said before, the lyrics tend to be pretty good, but instrumentally there's nothing to reel me in to get me to care about the message. The slower moments on the record just feel boring in comparison to the glitzy and upbeat moments, though I do think Satellite is okay. After that string of tracks that don't really do much for me, I think the album does end on a very good note with Love of My Life. As far as all of the more mellow and stripped down songs on this album go, this one actually has some punch to it thanks to Harry's vocals and the very fuzzy and synthy direction that the instrumental is taking. It has a cold yet nostalgic feel to it, fitting for the longing in the lyrics. I also appreciate how it can kind of represent him longing for different things, like a person or a place, as when he's referring to a person, he can maybe mean the getting to know your creases in your ends, but he also mentions coordinates and how his friends seem to know them better than he does. That latter part may be in reference to his hometown or England rather than a person specifically. Extensive touring probably prevents him from spending as much time there as he would like, after all. That ending piano is also really pleasant, and I think a very fitting conclusion to both this song and the record as a whole. Overall, the record definitely has a lot of highlights, but I can't help but feel kind of bored by a lot of what's on here. Most of this is because of the instrumentals, many of which feel very stripped down with not a lot of power to back up the storytelling and the lyrics here. Lyrically, I would actually say this is probably some of his best work yet, but when everything that surrounds the lyrics is boring or bland, it kind of makes them lose their impact. The more layered and upbeat tracks are definitely when this album is at its most engaging, I think, and I would honestly love to hear a whole record filled with songs like that of Music for a Sushi Restaurant in the future. As it stands, though, it's not a bad record overall, it's just not a very memorable one. I am feeling a strong 5 on this new Harry Styles record. But of course we do have to talk about album covers on this show, and I have to say this is a pretty great album cover. The very warm and muted tones, Harry just kind of standing there contemplating. The fact that the furniture is upside down, kind of representing how he may not be able to stay there as much as he would like thanks to touring or whatever, so it kind of feels a bit unfamiliar to him or a bit awkward. I think everything on this cover just explains and encapsulates everything in the record's songwriting instrumentals perfectly. But of course, those are just my thoughts on this newest album by Harry Styles. What did you guys think? Do you actually think this is his best work yet? Maybe his most intimate? Or are you kind of missing the more dynamic instrumentation of his previous work? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell if you're in Harry's house. You probably shouldn't be there. But until the next one, farewell.